Welcome to the Patron Saints of Pop Culture podcast. I'm Miguel Covarrubias.
And I'm Kathy Covarrubias. And today, let's talk about all of the MCU.
And Endgame, part 2-ish. So we didn't tell you what we were drinking the last time. It was soda, by the way, because it was nap time and not actual end of day bedtime for our toddler. Mm-hmm. So tonight we've got a Great Lakes Holy Moses, which I would say is more hoppy version of Blue Moon. Mm-hmm. And they're not a sponsor, but they could be. If anybody knows anybody at Great Lakes that it feels like, hey, we want to sponsor a podcast.
A local podcast at that.
Yeah. And Kathy is drinking a gin and tonic.
Yep. With a fancier gin. Not the cheap stuff, not the expensive stuff, but like just above the cheap.
the middle of the road gin.
Yes, like the middle, like the lower middle of the road.
And not the gin that you would use as lighter fuel.
Yeah, exactly. Like ones gin you can actually drink by itself.
So, spoiler alert for all of the MCU. If you have not seen any of the movies, where have you been for the last 11 years?
I don't know. That you have, I mean, I can understand not seeing like one or two movies, but you had to have at least seen most of them.
Yeah. And also spoilers for Endgame. Yeah, if you already listened to part 1, you know a lot of the review or the summary of that. Mm-hmm. So we're just going to be doing a review of the MCU as a whole, and we're going to give you our preferred watch order for the MCU because it makes more sense thematically as well as storytelling-wise.
Yep. And sometimes you just need a break between
certain genres.
Yes.
Yeah. So, review of the MCU. I think I'll get into this a little bit more here in just a second, but I am a huge fan of movies. It was always a big thing for my family growing up. I think the last time I talked about this was the very first podcast, but the only time we ever really sat down as a family was to watch movies. We knew it was going to be a good weekend when my dad went to Blockbuster and came home with 3 movies. And most of the time we would be able to watch all of them in the evening. We'd probably only get through 2 most nights. But it was family time. Like it was the thing that we kind of bonded over. We bonded over movies. And for me, the MCU felt like that. It felt like family. It felt like... I became very emotionally invested in the movies. I did talk a little bit about investment the last time. So I think the spectacle overall was fantastic. There are some that are just really poorly written, very poorly done. Age of Ultron, I'm looking at you. Thor, the first one, that beard is just like, it's almost... Yeah, it's worse than the fat suit in Endgame. Mm-hmm. And let's see, The Incredible Hulk. I mean, Edward Norton is fantastic, but he was in a completely different film, and you could tell that he was acting a completely different genre than Incredible Hulk.
Yep.
So that's my review of the MCU as a whole.
All right. Well, I was emotionally invested in Cap's butt. Because he's my boyfriend.
That's America's ass.
It is America's ass. But I have to give props to them. I mean, this is a huge undertaking that they decided that they were going to do. They knew it was a big risk to do this. But because they did that, a lot of other studios tried to piggyback on their success, and most of them failed. But I think they saw...
I think Warner Brothers is still trying.
I think they've kind of given up. Because every time they try to start something, it kind of goes away.
Wonder Woman 2 is coming out still. And...
Yeah, but I mean, like, their movies don't ever live up to the hype. Except for Wonder Woman. Everybody else kind of was, nah. I know people are going to fight me on that. I know of a specific person on my Facebook Wall, who is probably going to be mad that I said that. But DC comics better, movies way worse. But anyway, what I was saying was, it was a huge undertaking to do this. It was very risky. They didn't know that it was going to pan out. But I think kind of what helped them along is that they saw the success of the Harry Potter movies and how they were, like Harry Potter was able to do a lot of movies and still keep the audience interested in the storyline. And I think that's kind of why Marvel decided to do this. And I think the Disney merger was a very strategic, Disney buying them. Yeah. But I think it was a very strategic move on their part, because as soon as Disney bought Marvel, the quality of their movies, went up just a little bit. But that's my opinion.
Well, they had more money to back the movies.
Exactly. Yeah. That's well, in turn, sometimes, money makes for better movies. Not all the time, because we've seen big budget movies flop gloriously. But in Marvel's case, it worked for them. Well,
and if I'm to say something against one of the particular directors in the MCU, he is way overhyped. Mm-hmm. I dare not say more, or else
because you'll be crucified. But yeah.
Fanboy hate from all over the place.
Yep.
Anyway, like I was saying, that movies. Oh, right. We were going to talk about the watch order.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so this is how we would prefer to watch the MCU, because I feel like the phases kind of got out of order after the first Avengers. So, like, the movies were just kind of, story-wise, they didn't fit exactly where they should.
Well, and then there's a whole big argument of whether you should watch them chronologically in terms of when the movies took place, or chronologically on when they actually came out. But what we're trying to say is, I guess we follow more along the lines of when they came out versus when they came along chronologically.
A little bit, yeah.
I would say mostly, yeah.
Mostly.
But we will also make sure that we write these, or that we will give you the list in either the description or maybe on our Instagram page.
Follow us on Smashbomb. It's already there.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so do that.
So here's the list. Iron Man 1, Incredible Hulk. Iron Man 2, Thor, Captain America, The First Avenger, Avengers, Captain America, Winter Soldier. And the reason why this one goes up in order and right after the Avengers is it gives the reason why none of the Avengers show up in the other films, because S.H.I.E.L.D. was taken down, the communications are down. It makes more sense that way.
Well, and really, Captain America, Winter Soldier feels as though it happened right after the first Avengers.
Yeah, and don't pay any attention to Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. because I really think that's just in a completely different timeline.
Well, it has to be now that they've introduced timelines. Spoiler alert. But anyway, continue.
Yeah. After that, Thor: The Dark World, Iron Man 3. Of course, those two you can switch up because, I think that Iron Man 3 kind of fits a little bit better before Thor: The Dark World, but that's just me. But to break them up in between, you would go after that Guardians, because the Collector's introduced in Thor: The Dark World in the after credits scene, and then Guardians, the Collector comes in again. Then Age of Ultron. In my opinion, you can probably completely skip that movie and go right on to Ant-Man, then Civil War. After that is Spider-Man, Homecoming, Black Panther, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, Doctor Strange, Thor Ragnarok, Infinity War, Ant-Man and the Wasp, Captain Marvel, and then Endgame.
Yes. Yeah, so really the last little couple of movies are the order that they came out in, I think.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
Except for, Black Panther is out of order. Let's see. Spider-Man is out of order.
But not by too much.
Yeah.
We didn't go too crazy.
But I think that it fits very well story-wise, that it kind of builds the story a little bit better that way. And it makes a little bit more sense without throwing in a whole lot of plot holes into the MCU.
And plus, like we were saying, especially with the Guardians and with Ant-Man, there's a little bit more variation in terms of genre given. So we kind of split those guys up to give you guys a little bit more of a break between the dark brooding movies.
Yeah. Like The Dark World. That one was just... There was not a whole lot of comedic relief in that movie.
No, just a lot of Jane.
Yeah.
Being Jane.
Being weirdly damseled in that movie.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway.
So, talking about movies being my thing, and this is really more or less my take on the whole of the MCU, is I really... Like I said in part one, I really enjoyed Iron Man. Iron Man first came out in 2008. In 2008, it was the first time that I ever was away from my family, away from people that I knew. I took my very first job. It was across the country. I was 4 hours away from the closest person that I knew, and happened to be my sister. But I was on my own, and for the first time, I was facing antagonism. I was facing, actual
adult things,
crises that, I had an apartment on my own. I had my own bills to pay. I had people calling me the devil. I was advocating for this church to not ban, LGBTQ kids from youth group, because they thought that they would be distracting. And so because of that, I was faced with so much in my life that I felt like, oftentimes I just needed that release. I needed that couple of hours to find something in my life. Let's see, this is about the time that Iron Man came out, and I went to go see that.
Which Iron Man does not age well.
No, it does not.
When we rewatched it, I'm just like, oh, why do people like Iron Man? Like, he is a jerk. He's a misogynist. He is just, And maybe that's why, like, when it came to Civil War, whose side I chose, partly because, Cap has the looks, but also because Tony has that history of just being a jerk, and Cap has never been a jerk.
Well, he started out that way, but that's
Cap
his
has
character
never
arc.
been that way.
He kind of was at the end, a little bit.
I would disagree, because I have no idea what you're referring to, because he is an angel and a godsend, and he is America's ass.
Okay.
Or he has America's ass.
But I think this is the reason why, being a single man at the time, being on my own, facing that antagonism, the theme of the very first Iron Man, of course, is, when facing pressure and facing critical odds, his intellect reigned supreme in that it was be smarter rather than, be stronger. Which for me, that's something that I always prided myself on, that I always wanted to be the smarter person in the room. I always wanted to be the smartest person that, that at least people saw me as intelligent. Now, granted, I'm not that intelligent, but, I wanted people to see me that way.
Was it because you wanted the respect given to smart people?
Yes. I wanted the respect. I wanted people to take me seriously, in other words. I went to school for something. Granted, it was mostly theology, and that really doesn't mean anything outside of, those circles. Mm-hmm. So throughout the entirety of the beginning of the MCU, that was the, 2009 was when I met Kathy. It was when, I was just it was starting to feel like I was getting on my feet as an adult, as a person of my own. And I really felt like that's what the whole of the beginning of phase one of the MCU was about, was all of these characters finding their own personality, finding their own characters. And then it came to the Avengers, and the Avengers came out 2012. and it was a year after we were married. It kind of brought in phase two, which was kind of building this team, this coming together and trying to figure out who they were as a community rather than just single individual people.
Led by Cap.
Um,
I was
yes.
joking. I was joking. You were like, wait, what?
Well, you had Black Widow in there and how she's interacting with Cap and trying to get him to date and all this other stuff. And Iron Man's kind of weird thing with Rhodey and with the government is coming to play in Iron Man 3. And, the phase two was kind of how to build a new life as a we rather than just a I. And for me, that's that time frame in my life was trying to figure out how to be a we rather than just me. And so for me, that's what phase two really meant for me, because it's coincidentally, almost each of these phases coincided with a different point in my life. Different phases in my own life. Granted, we had a lot of trials and tribulations between 2011 and 2013, especially 2013. And, that's 2014 is around when the phase three kind of began.
To be honest, those, when you say different years, I can't tell you where we were. I can tell you 2016 to today. Before that, it's all just like a massive blur. But I think it's because we were doing so many things.
Yeah.
We were constantly moving. We were constantly in projects. We were constantly just busy that if you asked me what I did in 2014, I'd be like,
You moved.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, we moved to Colorado. And 2014 through the end of the MCU, which, Wave 1, Chapter 1, whatever they're calling this section of the MCU, really was that point when, trying to become a family was the process that we went through with trying to figure out what was going on with the miscarriages, and then eventually getting pregnant with Peter, and then ultimately having him and transitioning into a family rather than just, a married couple, which is a completely different thing. And I think that's what phase three was about family, was about these extended families rather than just the coupling of, a couple of characters, but rather than, a much larger world, a much bigger picture of family. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I think that each of the films kind of fits in with that storytelling wise, is because it does have that progression from the who am I to who are we to what is a family. And so I think that with Endgame especially, it really encapsulates the entire thing. That's why I think for me it was such an emotional experience, was because it was the end saying, this is what family is. Family is people who would die for each other, who would, be willing to
fight next to each other. Yeah.
Tony's sacrifice to me meant everything, because he went from this, arrogant jerk, like you said, to...
You make it seem like he wasn't.
No, he was. He was at the very beginning. Uh-huh. Like this arrogant, misogynistic jerk at the very beginning, just, sleeping with everybody, and just being a jerk. And then having that life-changing moment there, being taken captive and that whole learning process of Iron Man 1, and then throughout the entire MCU, and then realizing that, this was his family, and, not just his family, that Pepper and Morgan, but also the entire Avengers team. And that moment when he says, I am Iron Man, just, it got me. I'm sitting there sobbing in the movie theater, because it felt like, for me, these are people that, my family are the people that I would lay my life down for. Now, granted, I'm the type of person that, yes, if there was like an immediate situation, like somebody's about to be hit by a car, yes, I would go run in front of the car to push them out of the way, kind of thing. But like for somebody, like for instance, if like somebody were taken captive and be like, the only way to get them, make sure that they have a life is by you, trading your life for theirs. There's not a whole lot of people that I would do that for. Mm-hmm. Like,
you know how much I love my family? I'll let them eat me.
Yeah, we're not going to do that.
That's another That's another topic for another podcast. But all I'm saying, if we're starving and there's no food, I'm sacrificing myself.
Cannibalism is what separates us from the zombies, Kathy.
Okay.
By the way, and I know that we didn't write this into the podcast, but this is where I think that the second phase of the MCU is. We'll ask you at the end of your section here, but where I think the second wave, I don't know what they're calling, chapter 2.
I don't have an idea. Don't ask me, please.
Okay, not a problem. But where I think that chapter 2 of the MCU is going, I think they're going with the Young Avengers. And I think they've set this up throughout the entire chapter 1 in very subtle ways. But I think they're going to go there. Like, for instance, Hulkling, they had to introduce both the Skrull and the Kree as, characters. So Hulkling can exist, basically. They have Cassie Lang, obviously, Stature's there. They have like all of Hawkeye's daughter instead of Kate Bishop. I'm not quite sure if Falcon is going to be the Captain America or if they're going to bring in America.
Falcon's going to be Captain. No, it's going to be Falcon.
Well, Falcon and Bucky have their own TV show on Disney Plus that's coming out. So I'm not quite sure if they're going to be like.
Well, he can still call himself. He can still call himself Falcon, but carry the shield.
Yeah.
But just like the hammer, whoever has the hammer is Thor. Whoever has the shield is Cap.
Okay.
That's how I see it.
All right. I'm just saying that I don't think they're going to play a big role in the movies, in the films afterwards.
No, I think that's the plan, and I think they've pretty much made that clear.
So, anyway, that's what the MCU is meant to me. I did ask for more reactions on the MCU to see if I was the only one that really took the MCU as deeply as other people did, but I didn't get very many responses. So,
did you get any responses?
No.
Thanks, listeners. No, I'm just kidding.
But if you do have reactions, if you do feel the same about it, let me know, because, I like to know that I'm not alone in my nerdiness sometimes.
Well, you're not alone in your nerdiness. For this one particular thing, I'm not as nerdy as you.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm still definitely nerdy because I have definitely gotten to arguments at work about these things.
Over Harry Potter.
Not just Harry Potter, about this too. Well, not recently, because my coworkers around me aren't, they have no idea what my figures are and that kind of stuff, so I don't talk to them as much about my nerdiness. But the last place of employment, I think that's when Civil War was coming out. It must have been.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Very heated topic. It's still a very heated topic within our family. Civil War is. I still
maintain neither side was right.
You've only now changed that. You did not used to think that.
I did not change that. I even said it after we watched it, because we tried to watch it in the theater with Peter when he was like brand new baby.
He was a brand new baby. Mother's Day weekend, actually.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was this weekend, so many years ago.
Yep. See, I do. I can't tell you what year it was, but I know it. I know it happened.
It was 2016.
But anyway, let the record show that I'm right.
Okay.
Too late. I've said it. So for me, I think the biggest part that I am grateful for in terms of the MCU is the stereotypes that it helped to break. Because let's face it, back in 2008, Hollywood was still primarily pushing out movies who were primarily about white guys.
Yeah.
You know, that's the majority of the box office was filled with movies who starred white guys, and like a handful of movies that might have starred somebody of color or might have starred a woman. But if you wanted a if you wanted a blockbuster hit, you wanted a white guy at the front.
Well, the white guy savior as well.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, it's a movie about racism, but the protagonist is a white guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I guess like with Cap in a way, I feel like he did kind of break stereotypes. Obviously he is a white guy. I mean, he didn't break that stereotype. But what I'm talking about is he is an example of what a patriot of America should be. Yes, he is loyal to his country. However, he is loyal to the country's people. You know, he's more concerned with the little guy, making sure that the little guy is okay, versus making sure that the government is okay with him.
I would say yes and no.
What do you mean?
I would say at the very beginning he was more concerned about bullying, but yeah, he came to question more of the government throughout his character arc.
Yeah, well, when he first came in, he was fighting Nazis. So, of course, you know what I mean? Like, that's kind of, obvious. But unfortunately, nowadays, we're not as concerned with Nazis as we used to be. And it shows, America.
Well, when you wake up, let's see, a few, 70 years later, yeah, governments change.
And I don't know, I could go on and on about how we kind of neglected thinking that Nazis were a big concern after World War II. But anyway, I'm just going to move on because you're going to get me on a tirade. I'm very anti-Nazi. Have you noticed?
Yeah.
It's a good quality, I think. Part of my best qualities. Another stereotype, obviously, is Black Panther. Again, Black Panther was another one of those movies where you would go online before the movie actually came out, and there would be a ton of negative reviews by people who hadn't even watched it yet, simply because they wanted it to fail, because Black Panther was, like, behind the scenes was staffed by people of color, and of course, on screen was people of color, because Black Panther, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
And people were very threatened by that, which is absolutely, now that I think about it, it's the stupidest, funniest thing. Like, what? Why are you threatened by this? I mean, white males still make up the majority of, like, movie stars, like, highly paid movie stars. Black Panther having one successful movie who stars minorities is not going to take that away from you.
Yeah.
And plus, like, throughout cinema, you've had all of those years since cinema began to have all of you, people who look like you as stars. Why can't people who are black have just one movie where they can have a superhero who's badass, who is surrounded by more badassery? Like, why can't they have that? Why can't you just let them have that?
Yeah, it's really, like, for instance, they don't have a Latino or an Asian superhero yet in the MCU, even though they exist there in Young Avengers. That's why I'm like, America Chavez, like, she.
Well, I guess Mantis is played by someone who's Asian, but Mantis is not really Asian.
Yeah, and so is Minerva, but she's like one of the only people who died in the MCU. So
yep.
She died back in the 90s.
Yep. But anyway, so I really, that's another thing that the MCU was able to help to, was to show not just America, but just the general, like, people who produce movies and the studios, that a movie like Black Panther can and will make you money. So don't shy away from it, which is just, I don't know, it's just, now that I think about it, it's just stupid the way that they used to think.
Well, and like,
And still think.
if you were in a theater like we were for Endgame, like we were at a matinee on a Saturday.
It was packed.
It was packed. And as soon as like Wakanda, like the Wakanda shot was, fan service, obviously, but like it was fan service, but like the entire theater erupted in applause for it. Like they were cheering because Wakanda was there. They were fighting with them, that they were part of the family. They were an important part of the family.
Yep.
So,
Well, and I mean, just Black Panther, even though he's not seen as much. If it wasn't for Black Panther, then Bucky would still be like brainwashed and crazy.
yep.
They just contributed so much behind the scenes to the MCU, trying to progress the story along, and I think people just kind of forget about that, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, and that's where the vibranium to make Cap's shield came from. So,
Yep. Anyway, sorry, I could go on and on about how great Black Panther is. But anyway, also, too, another thing that it did, which DC is still trying to learn, is that superhero movies don't have to be dark and broody. Like, superhero movies can be fun and funny and colorful and spontaneous, I guess, is what I would say. And that goes along with, obviously, Guardians, clearly.
Yeah.
But then Ant-Man, which a lot of people thought that they could just skip Ant-Man, which he brought in so much important information into Endgame that if you didn't watch Ant-Man or Ant-Man and Wasp, you would be like, what?
Yeah.
Pym particles? What's this? And like, you wouldn't... in fact, as we were walking to our car after watching Endgame, there was people walking to their cars in front of us that they said, I didn't even watch Ant-Man. I didn't think it was going to be important.
yeah, I mean, like, how can you not love Paul Rudd? Like, seriously.
Yes, the man who never ages.
He is a national treasure.
Well, next to Cap's butt, yes. But I think...
And in real life, not in the MCU.
Yes.
Paul Rudd is a national treasure. Like, just for his appearances on Conan alone.
Yep.
Just with, making Mac and Me bigger than it actually is.
But like what I was saying, back to the topic at hand, superheroes don't have to, like, it was great to have them break that mold. And I think they were really nervous with Guardians. That was another one that people were like, well, I don't know if they're going to do so great.
Well, because it was a relatively unpopular
Little
property.
obscure.
Yeah.
And people were kind of afraid of it because it was breaking the mold. And I do like their version of Ant-Man. I'm glad that Hank Pym is still around, as the original Ant-Man, but I'm glad they didn't make him our focused Ant-Man, like our Ant-Man.
Yeah, that he wasn't the, smarter than Tony Stark and more on the verge of going insane than, most people in the MCU.
Yep. But again, his story was also important. So just word to the wise, everybody. When you're watching something like the MCU, make sure you at least watch all of the movies once.
Yeah.
You don't even have to go to the theaters. Just rent them at least once, just to fill you in, because there's a lot of things in Endgame that were important, even with the obscure movies. All right. And then last but not least, I'm not going to cry. But Captain Marvel 2 was also breaking stereotypes. And obviously I went more into this during our review of Captain Marvel. But it was awesome seeing a woman on stage like that. Oh my God, I'm going to cry, guys. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm crying. She was what a female superhero should have been all along. Like, not used at, like, wearing a costume that is appropriate and makes sense.
Yeah,
Just
practical.
That. Practical, yes. Just that. I mean, because even they made Black Widow's uniform more practical as the movies progressed, because I think people were making comments like, why would you have your zipper down that far? That's just a hazard. Like, doesn't make any sense.
Certain directors in the MCU.
Yeah. Anyway, but it just, man, it kind of makes me, it makes me glad that Peter has an example of what strong female characters can and should be.
No, and I think that Brie Larson, like, she brilliantly acted in these movies. Like, she didn't get enough screen time in Endgame.
I was a little pissed about that, to be honest. Like, when she just, like, okay, and where did she go? Like, is she...
She's handling things on other planets.
Which I get, and I know that, right now, at the beginning of Endgame, there wasn't much else that she could do. So what's the point of her waiting around when she has other worlds that she can help? But anyway, I get that. I just kind of wish she had a little bit more screen time. Just a little bit.
Yeah. Like with the haircut. Like that's, it was a good haircut.
Yeah. I'm kind of, I don't know. I don't like the way that they styled it. I mean, I'm more of a fan of the pixie cut when she has a pixie cut in the comments versus the cut that she had, which is not really pixie because it does, like, it's taller than a normal pixie. Yeah. I don't know. I wish you guys could see my hand motions so you guys can see what I mean by the different cuts.
More of the pompadour rather than the, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And she, like I said in, the Captain Marvel recap, like, I really see a lot of myself in her because my humor is very dry. In fact, I had somebody the other day as we were doing like compliments on Facebook, and somebody had told me that they can't always tell when I'm joking because my sarcasm and my humor it is dry. Like, it can be really dry, and unless you know me and are used to it, it tends to get missed, which I think is funny. When people miss my humor, I find it even more funny when they miss it. But anyway, but I found, I don't know, I really connected with Captain Marvel. But if you want to hear more about that, listen to that podcast. I'll try to stop gushing about her and crying. I have a love-hate relationship with the woman scene, if you guys all know what I'm talking about. Because again,
a lot of people do.
Just like the Wakandan scene, I feel like it was just fan service. How all of them got there at the exact same time makes absolutely no sense. And as you guys know, I'm a logical person, and so if I can poke holes in anything, I will. But I did cry. I will say that. I saw that and I did cry a lot. Yeah,
it was like, I didn't even mind. And see, by reading this book on screenwriting, which was really completely ruined me for a lot of things. But like this, I'm like, it really doesn't make no sense, but I don't care. Mm-hmm. And like in that book, it says your audience won't care if you've built other things. If you built other things that, it doesn't draw attention to that question. Like, how did they all get there at the same time?
No, because I didn't think about that until afterwards. So I guess they're right. And I think one thing that I really liked about this image is that, like, I'm going to throw myself out there. Newsflash, I'm a feminist. What? I know, shocking to everybody. But I think that image of all of them together, just, that's what feminists should be. It should be all, like actually, I feel like also men who also support feminists, men who are feminists, because men can be feminists too, which I know some feminists are going to come after me on that. But I think you can be.
I mean, just look at my rant yesterday and today about the last Game of Thrones episode. By the way, when we do an episode on that, I have a lot to say.
Yes, both of us have lots to say. But what I'm trying to get at is that the image should be as inclusive as we possibly can, because that in its core is what modern day feminist is. Like, modern day feminism is. It's inclusivity and equality for all, no matter what their sex or gender is, no matter what their sexual orientation is, no matter what they look like.
Yeah.
Like, it should just, I don't know if that's just what it should be. Anyway, now that I've told you a little bit about feminism.
Well, yeah, and I'm looking forward to Wave 2, but I know that Wave 2 is not going to feel as important to me as Wave 1.
Yeah, I really hope A-Force comes in. I know, again, it's going to be totally fan service.
Well, I really think that A-Force is going to come in, but I'm also thinking that it's like that the Young Avengers are going to play a role. And I think that they're going to bring in America Chavez. Like, she is...
Why?
Because she's the Latino representation that we haven't gotten yet in the MCU.
Yeah, well, they could have done something with Spider-Man, but that's okay.
Yeah, they may bring in the Spider-Verse. I just want to see a Spider-Verse movie where they have Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield and Tom Holland in it. I think that would be fantastic.
Oh my gosh, that would be great. If only, right?
I know.
Dreams.
What do you want to see in Wave 2? Let us know, and these are the ways that you can let us know.
You can find us on our Facebook and Instagram pages at Patron Saints of Pop Culture. I almost forgot what we were called for a second there. We also have a Twitter, which we hardly ever go on, at The Honest Faith. And then we also have our website at thehonestfaith.com.
So with all of that being said, we invite you to come and join the conversation.
Bye.